company. Welcome. My mic is mute. Nope, my host has unmuted my mic. Hi, I'm back. Welcome to Just Ask Jody Live. It's my monthly LinkedIn Live series, and it's good to be back. Today, we're going to be talking about a pretty common new business topic, agency new business topic. We're going to be talking about referrals. And I think what's interesting about referrals and referrals as they function as a business development tactic, I think referrals is a top way that agency owners, especially small agency owners, get business in. But most of them have a real love-hate relationship with it because it's while they're super useful, and I think one of the most efficient ways that you can get business development leads into your pipeline. I think a lot of agency owners feel like, wow, we're just so tapped out. We just keep going back to the same network. We keep asking people for business or asking people for connections. And they get a little frustrated that they start to feel a little bit of diminishing returns. So today I have a guest, my friend Audrey Kwan. Let me tell you a little bit about her before she comes in. So Audrey and I actually met a few years ago. We both happened to be in the same coaching program because Audrey and I believe that we get better professionally by having coaches. Anyway, Audrey, let me read you a quick bio because I think her background's super interesting and she's got a lot of great insight on this topic today. So Audrey, like me, is an advisor to agency. She helps agency owners scale sustainably and attract premium clients by building referral-ready ecosystems and positioning them as the go-to experts. She recently built a program called Agency Together. It's a curated referral network. It's designed specifically for agency owners who value collaboration over competition. She strategically matches cohorts, agencies that are part of this ecosystem of complementary partners. So it works really well, and it's fairly new, but it sounds like it's going really well. And I thought it was such an interesting way to kind of reinvent referrals. So Audrey, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
I'm excited to be here, Jody, and talk about all things referrals.
Did I do a good enough job in kind of introducing what this is and what you're doing?
Yeah. Thank you for sharing a bit about my background. I guess where I want to start is just sharing how this concept came to be.
Yeah.
Uh, Last year, I was having a bunch of conversations with agency owners. Mind you, I talked to a lot of agency owners.
Yeah.
One of the questions I started asking was, what's happening right now for you when it comes to landing clients? And the general feeling that I started to get was this, what I call this feeling of like, oh, if I get a client, or in this case, if someone else gets a client, I lose a client, right?
Yeah.
So general feeling. And I call that the dog eat dog world. And the more I started to lean into conversations that sounded like that, the more it kind of just rubbed me in the wrong way. I definitely don't feel that we grow with that type of thought. And I thought to
Yeah.
myself, hey, there must be something out there that connects agency owners together so that they could collaborate and refer each other business. And I went looking, and the thing is, I didn't see it. I didn't
Yeah.
see it, and that's how Agency Together, which is, this program you talked about, really it's a network, came together, is from these conversations. And I gotta say, it is fairly new, but yes, I think that what's exciting to see is how many agency owners want to collaborate, because the
Mm.
idea started out as literally a Google Sheets document. I put together a Google Sheets document, sent it out to my network, and within the 30 days, we had our first cohort of 10. Now we are 30 people strong inside Agency Together.
That's great. That's really great. Congratulations on that. And I know we'll be getting folks information if they're curious about talking to you about joining Agency Together, getting more information about it. We'll be offering that at the end. So I want to also just talk about referrals in general. So like I said in the intro, when I talk to agency owners, you probably heard this too. A lot of times people will call me and they'll say, like, I'm talking to you now because I've relied on referrals and now I feel like my referral network is tapped out and I need to do something else. And maybe they do need to do something else, or maybe they need to add to that. But often I find they haven't actually tapped out the referral network. Is that something that you hear, and yeah, what is your reaction?
I think there's two directions that I tend to go to when I hear that. The first is, I think you're right. I think sometimes the referral network that they have may not be tapped out. It may just be a matter of communicating and helping the people within your current network really understand who you need to meet. And so
Mhm.
I think that that's one element that I think is important when we're talking about referrals. And very specifically, Jody, you've probably heard of this concept. I know you have. It's called the buyers committee concept, and I feel that with agency owners, oftentimes when they're going out to ask for referrals, they're not actually looking at their buyers committee. They're looking at like one type of person, which we often call the decision maker, right? But your buyers committee actually has more than your decision maker. It also has your internal advocates and your external influencers. Like these are the people who are, let's say for example you're in a niche, right? Let's say for example you're in a orthodontics niche. I know not the most fun niche, but let's just use that as a niche, right? If we look at the buyers committee, most people are going forward and they're only asking to meet, for example, the orthodontics of the practice, right? And that's one person in your buyers committee, but you got to look at the other levels. So for example, a internal advocate could be the treatment coordinator. Now I know this because I worked with a orthodontics agency, and so I know that the internal advocate would be like a treatments coordinator, right? And so
Yeah.
those people will get you in the door of orthodontics. And then you've got external influencers. We know that with most orthodontics, they don't have full-time HR people inside their business, right? So maybe you're looking for a external influencer, i.e., a fractional HR person that works with orthos, right? Now, if you flush that out very clearly, you automatically aren't just asking for one person. Now you have three types of people you can ask for to get in the door of your ideal client, right? So that's one direction that
Yeah.
I tend to talk about. And here's the other direction. Yes, I do think you can sound like a broken record if you keep going back to the same people and asking for the same things over and over again. And that's where leveraging new networks come into play. And that's really where Agency Together comes into play, because the concept behind Agency Together and why it works so well is bringing together agencies that don't step on each other's toes, right? And
Mm.
so when agencies are curated into groups where they don't step on each other's toes and their buyer committee is very clear, they're able to leverage each other's networks to grow. And that's very important, because if you're not spending time connecting with other people who are not stepping on your toes with the intent to share more connections and referrals, well, then of course you're going to end up in a broken record situation.
Yeah, yeah. First of all, I don't think I have ever heard. I'm going to expose myself a little bit here. I don't think I've ever heard that term buyers committee before. I've heard it referred to in different ways, but that's beautiful. I am totally going to borrow that. And yeah, absolutely. Whether it is, the orthodontics example is a great one, really good for smaller, very niched agencies. But and some of the agencies I work with, they're still small, but they may be talking to, say, I don't know. Actually, I just got off the phone this morning with a client, with an agency that's working with Visa. They're an 8-person agency, but they're working with Visa,
Mm.
the major, credit card company. So yeah, you better believe there are buying committees there. Those big enterprise clients, a lot of people to talk to and to adjust your message to. You also, I think, touched on a really important idea that you need to be clear and specific about what you want. I often say you got to match what you want with why the ultimate client is going to benefit from it. So I think, and I'd be again curious to know if you heard this. Oh, and quickly, by the way, folks, if you're here live with us today, don't be shy. Please do ask questions. This is really here for you guys. I try to always ask questions that I think my audience wants to know about, but put a question in the comments, please. But here's what the question often comes back. It's like, well, how do I make my referral request more effective? And I think one way is to not stop just asking for the business. So I shouldn't say, actually, I'm a big believer in asking for the business. We should stop just asking for the favor, because I think while I want to do a favor for you, I also want you to make it as easy as possible for me to execute on that favor. I'd love to hear your thoughts about that and how
Mm.
you help your clients.
Mhm. Um, I I I don't see sharing connections and referrals as like a tit for tat. So what does that mean? I definitely think that we are in a world where relationships are becoming more and more important, right? And so
Yeah.
I say that because I mean, if you're an agency owner and you're listening right now, you've probably seen it. There is more skepticism right now in the market for marketing and sales, and we could go into all the reasons, and I won't go into all the reasons.
Mm,
I will say this right now: we're agency owners and we're not blind to the fact that AI is right in front of us, right? And AI does cause a lot of that skepticism. And because of that, what we're seeing is this return back to needing more relationship, more connection, more trust, and also an understanding of each other's values before wanting to work with each other, right? And
hmm.
because of that, and this fact isn't new, but because of this, I think what we're seeing is this return to this idea that people want to get introduced to other people because that is relationship, that is trust, and there's also shared values that we're getting introduced to other people, right? So I see a return in that, and I think if that's the operating system that we're going off of in terms of how we want to grow our business, that is understanding that we need more relationships. It shouldn't be a tit for tat where it's like, hey, I
Mhm.
come to you and I shared this person with you, now you owe me a favor, right? That's not how we grow
Right.
businesses. And in agency together, we talk about that. Sure, we come together and we are sharing connections. We're looking for opportunities to share those connections, right? But we also want to make sure that when we're sharing connections, that it's from a place of value, because there's no
Yeah.
point in quantity if there's no quality, right? And so that's what we're really looking at. That's what I look at anyways. It's like, if I'm sharing relationships, sharing connections with other people, I'm always looking at quality and not quantity.
Yeah. When your folks are in the process of sharing those relationships, sharing those connections, what kind of guidance do you or would you give them for equipping that partner to make that connection in terms of like how do they introduce themselves? How do they make the pitch on behalf of their fellow referrer?
Yeah, that's great. So the buyer committee concept that we just talked about is shared with everyone in the cohort. So everyone actually
Mm,
does the buyers committee concept before they come into the cohort. And we do what we call kickoff month. So in kickoff month, everyone gets to know each other. We're doing kind of what we call breakup sessions where everyone gets one-to-one time with each other in the cohort, learns about each other's buyers committee, so that when we come in to share connections and referrals, there's already a relationship that is built, and also an understanding of who exactly is the right person to connect each other to. And so when
mm,
we are doing those connection calls, everyone has had time to learn those things and go out and think about their own network and who might fit into the buyers committee of someone else inside that group. And as you can tell, right, if we're a group of 8 people and everyone has their buyer committee flushed out, so you're not just looking for 8 different types of people to connect each other to. It's almost 20, it's 24 people now because we know the buyers,
right.
right? So there's more opportunity to find those quality connections.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. What do they need to do to make that introduction? So they've got they know who they need to talk to, or they know who, yeah, they know who they need to talk to, but what are they saying? Is there a sort of a formula or best practices for like, the words that they are communicating in order to make that connection?
Yeah. So typically when we're and an example that I use and I share, because this is the way that I connect people to each
Yeah.
other, I you should do it by email. But first, and before I even connect people by email, number one, you got to ask permission. So that's the first thing, right? So you've got to make sure that, hey, if you're connecting two people, it isn't forced, meaning that
Mhm.
you do have to connect with each person and ask if it's okay to connect each other. And usually it's, hey, John, I know Jody over here. Jody is an agency consultant and you need to meet her because enter the reason, right? You got to enter the reason, right? Would it be okay if I connect both of you? And then once I get a
Mhm.
yes, then it's an email connection. And the best practice in email connection is to say, hey, Jody, meet John, right? And then
Mm.
usually what I will do is I'll write down, this is who Jody is and this is who John is. And here's the reason why I'm connecting both of you. Happy connecting. Right? And
Yeah.
then I let that the conversation go. Right. So that's
Right, marinate, like, yeah, or like take off on its own if it's
yeah,
going to. Hopefully it will.
yeah.
I mean, I think you said the reason, like, I think that's also going back a little bit to, I think, what is often missing. So the reason, and I think that's where sometimes agencies that I work with, they struggle a little bit with that, or they just sort of forget that the referrer needs the rationalization for making this connection.
Yeah.
Why am like, yeah, for you're probably saying, look, I'm putting myself out on a limb here. Why is it important that John meet you, Jody? And so in this particular case, my reason might be like pulling up off my own elevator pitch, like, hey, I help agency owners go from a unreliable system to a more step-by-step, reliable, repeatable process for success.
Mhm.
So I think that's the reason. Now, if that agency owner, if John is not a small agency owner, or if John has business development like wrapped up, like he doesn't need any help, then he'll probably say, thanks, I don't need that, and appreciate the referral. But for
Mhm.
those who do, I think it helps both the referrer, because now you feel like, okay, I can go out on a limb because I totally get in that 1 to 2 sentences, Jody does fulfill a need. So that's legitimate. I feel like I can comfortably refer her.
Mhm.
And John, and I can see how John potentially might need this service. I
Yeah.
think that's where I think the sort of where agencies tend to go is the more like, hey, do you know anyone? Hey, it's sort of that sense of lack, like, hey, I need more work. Hey, the pipeline is empty. Hey, my team doesn't have enough work to keep them busy. Is that also what you're saying?
Yeah, I think it can also be more nuanced. So what I mean
Mm,
is, let's say I'm out in the world and I'm doing my own networking out in the world. Okay.
yeah.
And as I'm doing my own networking, if I am part of a cohort of,
Yeah.
let's just for example, if I'm part of an agency together cohort, I have 5 people on my brain that I see and I know do marketing work, right? But now I'm out in the world and I'm doing my own networking. I have them in the back of my brain and I'm thinking about them as well too, right? So I might come
Okay.
across someone in a conversation and I might not even know that person that well,
Mm,
but they might say something that sparks a thought for me, right? And for me, when that happens, I'm either making a mental note or an actual note on my phone, right? They might
yeah.
say something along the lines of, like, and this is using Jody as an example. They might say something along the lines of, "Man, my marketing system is all over the place. It's just as crazy,
Yeah.
right?" I might be thinking, "Oh, I know Jody who has a marketing system for people. I got to connect these two, right?" And I might have that thought in my head and say, "Hey, yeah, I know someone who could actually help with that. Would you like me to connect you later on? I could totally do that by email." I'm asking for that permission right there in person, right? And so if
Yeah.
they say yes, I'm getting that yes back. And when I come home, I'm going to connect them by email. I'm going to connect you and John or whoever it
Yeah.
is by
Yeah.
email, right? So I think that's the nuance of it. It's a way of thinking that it's not just this instance where, oh, we're going to be looking for referrals now and let's all go sit down and plug through 100 people
Right.
and figure this out. I think it's more nuanced. There is that component to it, but there's also the fact that you live your life just as every other business owner lives their life. And if you're exposed to a
Mm,
group of people who are connecting and referring each other and they kind of live in your brain, the reality is you're leveraging each other's networks every time you go out into the world, right?
yeah.
I think that's really what this is about. It's that opportunity not just to plug in and look at your current network, but also as you
Mm.
go up throughout the year and you're building connections, how can you help others as well as helping yourself?
Do you think that kind of connection, that sort of, instinct for connection, do you think that comes much more naturally for some people versus others?
That's right. 100%. I think it does come more naturally for some than others. And I also think that's why agencies together exist because I
Mm,
think it actually gets people moving into that type of thinking where it's helping them not only think about themselves, it's helping them think about others, but in doing that also growing, right? So now you have a opportunity where you're able to get others to help think about you and grow your agency and then you're also thinking about others and helping others grow their agency.
yeah.
And that's true collaboration. That's true connection.
Yeah. And so you believe, as a bit of a leading question, so you believe that you can actually take someone who maybe doesn't feel like this comes naturally and help them integrate it into their work process in a natural way?
I think that I, I would say they would have to have the desire. So I can help
Mm,
someone who has the desire to want to tap into collaboration, connections, and
yeah, okay.
referrals, make it a more consistent practice in their business.
Right. That's a great way of saying it. And I agree. I guess I would probably say the same for my business. Yeah, I would sort of say flippantly, like the least ideal client for me is that person who says, "I just need more leads." The best client is the one who says, "I'm committed to doing this. I just know that I don't know. I don't. Well, I know what I don't know, and I don't know what I don't know, and I need that framework." So I love that answer.
It's
I
also
also
values. It's also a values thing,
mm,
right? So I think that if you value connection and collaboration, then I think there's a place for you to make that more consistent. But if you don't
yeah,
value those things, there's nothing I could ever do to change your values. So that.
sure,
So I think I come from that
yeah,
space, and I also want to really say this, like uh, as much as Agency Together is a referral network for agency owners, it's also very values based, right? It brings together
mhm,
people who are wanting to tap into connections and collaborations because they believe in that. And they
yeah,
truly believe that with where we are going right now in the market, there is a swing back to referrals being a very important part of agency growth.
yeah, yeah. I think partnership. I think has been a big word that I'm seeing, and a lot of just on people's LinkedIn feeds, and just in general, sort of a theme for 2025. Um, I wanted to like to move on a little bit and ask about the steps that have to be taken once that connection is made, because I think the ball gets dropped here a lot as well. Tell me a little bit, like, so let's say you've connected me to John, and John's like, "Yeah, you know what? I need this, or I know someone else who needs this. Now what? Now what are some best practices? What should I make sure that I do to not only make you look good, but to make me look good too?"
Yeah. Do you mean continuing that relationship in the conversation?
Yeah, yeah. If you have any
Yeah.
guidance there.
Yeah, I think whenever you're tapping into a connection, someone's introduced you, right? Uh, Very rare does that first conversation lead to signing a contract, right? Like
Yeah,
let's be realistic, right? So if you just
right.
met someone, you're not going to be signing a contract the minute that you meet them, and so there's nurturing of that relationship. And sure, I think whenever you're introduced to someone, the first thing you got to decide is, hey, in terms of my connection strategy, where do they fit in, right? So what I mean by that is this person ready to sign on for some work with you? In which case, they
Yeah.
kind of go into what I call like the priority line, right?
Mhm.
Maybe they're not ready to sign on work for you right now. Maybe there's an opportunity that isn't here, but it's going to come later. So they've got to go into your nurture, right? So you've got to make sure you write them down as a person you're going to nurture. And then you know what? There are instances where you meet people where you're just like, no, I just don't think I can get along with this person, right? And that's
Yeah.
okay, right? Because we're all made and built differently. And so let's look at each of those different scenarios, right? If you meet someone that you feel is just not the right fit for you, you're not aligned, whatever that is, I think it's okay to say to that person, hey, it was great meeting you. Is there any way I can help you by introducing you to someone else? And they can share,
That's so generous.
right? They can share. And then if you know someone, great. If you don't know, that's okay too. But it's also okay
Yeah.
for you to ask, right? Because the way we grow our networking connections is by asking others if they know others they can connect us with. So don't be afraid to ask that. So even if that person is not the right fit for you, ask, right? What's
Yeah.
the worst they can do? They can say no. Great. They said no,
Yeah.
you move on, and that's that, right? Now
Yeah.
the second area that we talked about is nurturing. You might come across someone where you're like, yeah, it sounds like there's gonna be a project coming down the road in the next 6 months, right? Well, this goes into your nurturing, right? When I say nurturing, what I mean is, no, you're not gonna bombard them across the next few weeks with emails asking to work with them. You're gonna touch base with them, once a month to
Yes.
see where things are, how things are going. And you're gonna also want to make sure that you're tapped into the reality of their business and their life. And what does that mean? It means doing the due diligence of going on LinkedIn, looking at what they might be posting, looking at what's going on, being
Yeah.
contextual when you nurture
Mhm.
them, right? And
Yeah.
the other area that we talked about is when you come across someone who's ready to work with you. Now that's a whole different story, right? That really is booking in that next call, making sure you're moving them into the next conversation and signing the
Yeah.
contract. Really, at the easiest way I can put it is there are those three categories, and you need to really figure out what those three are, and then figure out how you want to nurture that person according to which category
Yeah.
they fit into.
And you know what you don't wanna do? And I have seen this happen. So you don't want to ask for a referral. So I ask you for a referral from John. John's getting a lot of airplay today. And you're like, you make the connection, and John comes back to me and maybe BCCs you so you can be brought gently out of the loop and says, "Great, I'd love to meet Jody," or "Hey, Jody, great to meet you." And then Jody doesn't reply.
Mhm.
Or replies and says, "Oh, this is great, but now I've gotten really busy and I can't actually talk to you for 3 weeks," or takes it a couple of steps and then drops it. That is, yeah, don't do that. I think I think there's a little bit of commitment there. Like, you need to make sure that you're ready to reap the benefit of a good networking strategy, a good referral strategy, and not drop the ball for sure.
That's such a good point. Yeah, sometimes, as small agency owners, Jody, you probably see this all the time. The agency owner gets sucked into working
Yeah,
in the business, and then they forget to work on the business.
yeah,
And things like shared connections might just fall to the wayside when in reality, that shared connection should be a priority because who knows where that conversation is going to lead. And when I
right.
say that, maybe that conversation isn't going to be a new business, but you never know where that conversation might take you. Let me just give you an example.
Sure. Yeah, yeah, I'd love that.
So inside agency together, what happened is we had two people that connected in a cohort, and one person, let's call Jane and John again. Okay, so Jane shares a referral with John, right? And John goes and meets with that referral, and they connect. That referral and John are talking. All of a sudden, John's like, you know what? I actually know someone for this person who's referred to me. So they refer their friend to the referral. Okay, and as those two referrals are talking to each other, a project comes out of it. That project then loops back into Jane, who referred everyone, because guess what? When the referrals closed the project, they needed someone to support in an area, so they brought Jane back in the conversation. Do you see how that
Wow.
works sometimes?
Triple win.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So we don't know where these conversations are going to go and where they're going to lead. But I
yeah,
firmly believe that if we are connectors and we meet people who are connectors and are willing to
yeah,
share, you can see like there's stuff like that starts to
yeah,
happen, right? And it's
yeah,
happened in the network, and it was just such an amazing that happened in the network that people were like floored. But you know what? It happens more than we think. It happens more.
yeah.
So I just want to share that example.
I love that. Thank you so much for that. And I think that there's also, I suppose there's a bit of a fine line, but you brought up a couple of things that I wanted to touch on. One, this idea of being willing to have a lot of conversations, even the conversations that initially look like they may not lead anywhere, because you never know. Um, I think on the other hand, there's also the philosophy, which is not invalid, that says, like, don't waste your time. Don't, like, the people who just want to pick your brain. I think there's a whole other set of things that you can say, what, there's not a mutual benefit here. But I would be very careful when talking to people, because even at some of those calls or some of those interactions, they often, at least I can say this in my own experience, they have fulfilled, or they have um, shown benefits in ways that I could not have even anticipated back then. And so, yeah, I think there's a willingness to have at least one conversation with people who at least fit into if not your ideal client profile, the profile of the people who could refer you there. I think that's another reason to have a really strong ideal client profile, because then it does make it easier to say, is this going to be mutually beneficial, or am I just wasting everyone's time?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I love that, you've hit the foundation. The foundation is, hey, you got to know who your ideal client is.
Yeah.
And from your ideal client also flows that buyer's committee concept, right? And then
Yeah.
you have those things together, it's very easy to figure out who you want to spend more time having conversations with
Yeah.
when connections, collaborations, and referrals are part of your growth strategy.
Yeah. As always happens, the half an hour that we schedule for our conversation has gone phew right by. Is there anything that I didn't ask you today that you would like to spend a couple moments talking about, just to make sure that people are walking away with a good sense of what a good referral strategy looks like?
Um, you know, I think I would leave everyone with this thought. I think that we're entering into a season, a time in the economy where trust is something that is
Mm,
currency. And what I mean by that is if we're not actively looking at how we are building more trust as business owners, then I think we're going to be missing out on growth. And it's like I mentioned in the top of this conversation, we're in a market that's very skeptical. There's more skepticism.
Mm,
Okay? And I just want to say that I think that building trust is really a strategy. And how
yeah.
are you building more trust in your business right now with your ideal clients?
I mean, I think we could have a whole other half an hour conversation about that. In fact, I've been playing around with this theme of like trust as the antidote to risk. And, trust also isn't just being there. It is a warm, fuzzy feeling in some ways, but not just a warm, fuzzy feeling. And trust is also built in terms of marketing and sales through consistency, through client-focused messaging, through a website that gets the visitor to the information they need, um, through clear language versus jargon. It's a lot. Everyone abstractly understands trust, and I think sometimes it's not applied in the practical ways it needs to be. But that's a great way to, yeah, to end. Um, so for anyone who, well, we didn't have a whole lot of comments today. I hope lots of people were listening and are absorbing all of this. And like I said, I know a lot of people will watch the replay as well. So I want to make sure that they know how to reach you, and we'll include this in the comments as well. If they're interested in talking to you about Agency Together, what's the best way to get in touch with you, Audrey?
Yeah, simply go to our website. It is agencytogether.com. When
There's
you
the
get
graphic on the screen too.
Yeah, thank you for doing that. When you get there, you can learn more about the network. We also have a free mixer event that is coming up in April. Feel free to get on to and join us at that event.
Oh, that would be great in April. Okay, and we're recording this in sort of mid February 2025, and so that would be April 2025. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Thank you so much for this. I think we should use. I should get you back on the schedule so we can talk about trust and trust building. It's like a very close cousin to the referral strategy, and so
It is.
important in all things marketing and business development.
Thank you.
It was great to talk to you. I know you're also about to go on vacation, so have a fantastic trip, and hopefully everyone will keep sharing those referrals while you're not while you're out of town. That the engine will keep going while you're gone. Anyway, thank you, Audrey. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Jody. I'll see you soon.